Chapter 1: The Fall of Skaven Forces. The screeching cries of Skaven filled the night air, echoing across the twisted, rotting trees of the Sylvania forest. The Skaven horde had thrown themselves at the undead defenses once again, but just like the many assaults before, they were met with utter devastation. The battlefields around Count Vladik von Carstein's domain were now littered with the broken bodies of ratmen, their crude armor shattered, and their warpfire weapons extinguished. Warlord Critic paced furiously inside his makeshift command tent, claws twitching, ears flat against his skull. His tail lashed from side to side as he listened to the pathetic whimpers and reports from his underlings. "Fools, worthless scum. You promised me victory. Victory," Critic snarled, baring his yellowed fangs as he turned on his warlock engineers and chieftains, who cowered before his rage. Now all is lost. We tried, yes, but the dead things, they do not fall die, squeaked one of the warlock engineers, nervously gripping the hilt of his rusted sword. The magic, it holds them up. They fight forever. Critic growled, slamming a clawed fist onto the warp table in front of him, causing the crude map of the region to shift. "I care not about excuses. Fix this, or I'll flay your hides and feed you to the gutter rats." The warlords and engineers exchanged fearful glances, each too terrified to speak. They knew the truth. There was no stopping von Carstein's legions. The vampires and their thralls were tireless, relentless, and immune to the fear that usually sent Skaven enemies running. Every time the Skaven attacked, their bodies piled higher, while the undead simply rose again, as if death was a fleeting inconvenience. Outside, the sounds of battle grew quieter, signaling the latest defeat. The unmistakable thumping of marching bone echoed in the distance. The skeletal ranks of the vampire lord's forces were regrouping, ready to crush the next feeble attempt by the Skaven. One of the chieftains, a grizzled veteran named Grit, finally dared to speak. "Warlord, we cannot keep throwing forces at them. Our numbers shrink, yes, while the dead things grow." Shut up," Critic spat, turning his venomous gaze on Grit. "Are you questioning me, Grit? You think you're smarter, better than me? No, mighty warlord," Grit hissed, lowering his head submissively. But we must plan something else. If we continue, all of Clan will die." Critic narrowed his red eyes, ears twitching with agitation. He knew Grit was right, as much as it galled him to admit it. His forces were being bled dry. For every undead creature they brought down, 10 more took its place. The situation was dire. He couldn't afford another full-scale assault, not if he wished to stay alive. There must be a way to break them," Critic muttered, his voice lowering to a calculating hiss. "Von Carstein. He draws power from the living things, yes. His feeding keeps him strong." The room fell silent. The chieftains and warlocks stared at their warlord with confusion, though a few of the more cunning Skaven began to nod in agreement. If we strike at the living livestock he keeps in his lair, poison them." Yes, Critic's eyes gleamed with a manic light. Then the vampire grows sick. Weaken him, and the victory is ours." The warlocks began to chatter excitedly. Yes, poison the blood meat. Clever, yes. Then we send Eshin, silent, quick assassins. They do the dirty work, Critic said, his claws scratching at the table. Strike from shadows, poison the food blood, and the vampire will feed on weakness. The room buzzed with anticipation. The warlord's plan was bold and dangerous, but for the first time in weeks it offered a glimmer of hope. Critic straightened up, his tail curling with satisfaction. "Summon Clan Eshin. Tell them I have a mission that will bring the fall of von Carstein." His snarl turned into a wicked, toothy grin. This is how we win. Chapter 2: Eshin's Dark Gamble. In the deep, shadowed tunnels beneath Sylvania, where even the cursed moonlight could not penetrate. The air was thick with the smell of rot, decay, and the sharp tang of warpstone. The Skaven of Clan Eshin thrived in this darkness, their eyes glinting red in the gloom as they moved silently, each step taken with the precision of a predator stalking its prey. At the heart of their warren, Nightblade crouched atop a pile of bones and rusted weapons, his black cloak blending him perfectly into the shadows. His eyes narrowed as he listened to the frantic squeaking of Warlord Critic's messenger, a scrawny Skaven with twitching whiskers and a nervous tail that never stopped flicking. The Warlord sends urgent message, yes. Orders from high above. You are to destroy the vampire, the mighty von Carstein. The messenger sputtered, barely able to hold his breath. Nightblade's eyes glinted with cold amusement. Kill von Carstein, eh? Easy to say, but not easy to do. His voice was a low hiss, his claws tapping against his warpstone dagger. Speak, rat, what is the Warlord's brilliant plan? The messenger gulped, bowing lower before the master assassin. We poison the vampire's livestock, yes. Make them sick weak. He feeds on them, grows weak slow. Then you strike, yes, in his lair. The Warlord promises great rewards, yes. Nightblade tilted his head, considering the plan. It was risky, but it had merit. The Vampire Lord was far too powerful to confront directly, but if they could weaken him, make him vulnerable, it could work. Eshin. Clever, yes. Nightblade muttered, his sharp teeth flashing in the dim light. The Warlord plots well this time. He glanced around the chamber, where his elite assassins waited in silence, hidden in the darkness as though they were part of it. His lieutenants, Shadowtail, Quickfang, and Poisonclaw, watched him with eager eyes. They lived for such missions, to strike unseen and bring down mighty foes without ever being noticed. This was the way of Clan Eshin, and they were the best at what they did. Ready your claws, prepare the poison, Nightblade hissed to his followers. We go to the cursed lair of the vampire. We make the humans sick die so the blood drinker can die too. Shadowtail, his closest lieutenant, stepped forward, bowing his head. And what of von Carstein's defenses, mighty Nightblade? His lair is guarded by dead things, not easy prey. Nightblade waved a claw dismissively. The dead things are slow dull. Yes. They do not hear us like living prey. We slip past, poison the food meat. The vampire will never know we were there until it is too late. Poisonclaw chittered with excitement, his tail thrashing. The vampire will feed on filth, yes. His power will rot fall. We strike when he is weak sick, and take his head. The assassins murmured in agreement, their voices barely above whispers, their tails twitching in anticipation of the kill. Nightblade rose to his full height, casting a long shadow across the chamber. We leave at once. We take Sylvania back from the vampire. When he is dead, Clan Eshin will rise. We will be rewarded with warpstone, yes, and the Warlord will bow to us. The assassins scattered into the darkness, their forms melting into the shadows as they prepared for the journey. Nightblade watched them go, a sly grin on his face. He knew that if they succeeded, their status in the Under-Empire would rise, and even Warlord Critic would have to offer them respect. But if they failed, well, failure was not an option. The poisoned blood would be the key to von Carstein's downfall. Nightblade could already taste the victory, sweet as fresh kill meat. The journey to Castle Drakenhof was perilous, the Skaven assassins slipping through the dark forests of Sylvania, moving under the cover of night. The towering trees, gnarled and twisted, seemed to reach out with clawed branches, and the constant feeling of being watched never left their twitching nerves. Undead patrols roamed the forest, their empty eyes scanning the trees, but the Skaven were far too skilled to be seen. They darted between shadows, skittering silently over fallen logs and through thick brambles, always keeping to the deepest darkness. At last the ancient spires of Castle Drakenhof loomed before them, a black silhouette against the blood-red moon. Nightblade crouched low, his eyes narrowing as he studied the fortress. Its towering walls were crawling with the undead, mindless sentries that stood watch over the vampire lord's domain. This is it, Nightblade whispered to his lieutenants. The blood drinker sleeps inside, thinking himself safe. But we will show him the error of his arrogance. Shadowtail nodded. How do we enter? The gates are guarded, and the dead things do not tire sleep. We do not enter through the gate, fool, Nightblade hissed, his eyes scanning the walls. We climb the tower, slip through the cracks in the stone. Once inside, we find the blood cattle, and we poison them. The Skaven assassins slunk through the undergrowth, making their way to the base of the castle. Like a pack of hungry wolves, they began to climb, their claws finding purchase in the ancient stone walls. Silent as death itself, they moved upward, the wind whistling softly around them. Nightblade's mind raced with thoughts of the vampire lord's downfall. The poisoning was only the beginning. Soon, very soon, von Carstein would feel the creeping weakness in his veins, and then Clan Eshin would be there to deliver the final blow. As the assassins slipped over the battlements and into the heart of Castle Drakenhof, Nightblade allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The gamble had begun, and the vampire lord's days were numbered. Chapter 3: Into the Heart of Darkness. The walls of Castle Drakenhof loomed over the Skaven assassins as they clung to its stone surface, scaling the cursed fortress with clawed hands and feet. The air was thick with the oppressive stench of death and decay, the faint glow of the blood-red moon casting ominous shadows across the battlements. Nightblade, leading his pack of assassins, was silent as ever, his sharp eyes scanning every inch of the vampire's lair. They had slipped past the undead patrols with ease, the shambling horrors too slow and mindless to catch even the slightest flicker of movement from Clan Eshin's finest killers. The true challenge lay ahead: the poisoned blood, the key to bringing down Count Vladik von Carstein, awaited deep within. Careful, slow, Nightblade hissed to his lieutenants, his voice barely a whisper. The dead things are stupid dull, but the vampire, he is not. Stay in shadows, unseen, unheard. Shadowtail, climbing just behind him, nodded quickly, his whiskers twitching with excitement. Yes, great Nightblade. We will not be seen caught, no. They reached a narrow window, its ancient glass cracked and filthy. Nightblade gestured with a clawed hand, and Poison Claw, the group's expert in toxicology, slipped forward to test the air. He sniffed cautiously, his nose wrinkling in disgust. The air is foul here. Full of death rot, Poison Claw whispered. Perfect for the dead things, yes. Not good for us. Nightblade's lip curled into a sneer. This place reeks of the vampire's filth. Come, we move. They squeezed through the narrow window, dropping silently into a dusty corridor lit only by the sickly green glow of warpstone lanterns. The oppressive atmosphere of Castle Drakenhof pressed down on them, a palpable force of death magic that made even the Skaven's fur stand on end. The hallway was lined with decaying tapestries, each one depicting the long and cursed history of the von Carstein dynasty. Nightblade paid no attention to the gaudy displays of vampiric grandeur, his focus only on the mission at hand. They needed to find the blood cattle, the human thralls kept alive so von Carstein could feed. Where is it? Quickfang asked in a low, nervous voice, his ears twitching as he glanced around. The blood meat, where? Not far, Nightblade answered, his red eyes gleaming. Follow. The assassins slunk through the corridor like wraiths, their steps silent, their tails low to the ground. They avoided the rooms where the dead slept, sensing the unnatural cold that radiated from them. It was clear that the undead minions of von Carstein were everywhere within these cursed walls. They descended deeper into the castle, the walls narrowing and twisting as they ventured into the bowels of the fortress. The air grew colder, and a faint, rhythmic thumping sound echoed through the stone, a sound that Nightblade recognized immediately. The heartbeat, Nightblade hissed. The humans, the blood cattle, are near. Poison Claw's nose twitched with anticipation. We poison them, make their blood foul sick. Then the vampire drinks, and he will suffer rot. The assassins followed the sound of the heartbeats, their claws scraping lightly against the stone as they moved closer to their prey. Finally, they came upon a great iron door, reinforced with runes that glowed faintly with necromantic energy. Nightblade signaled his lieutenants to stop. There. Inside is the blood meat. Quickfang, the lock. Quickfang scurried forward, his nimble claws working quickly to pick the ancient lock on the door. The others stood ready, their ears straining for any sign of movement from the undead that patrolled the castle's depths. With a soft click, the lock gave way, and the door creaked open. The stench of human fear and sickness wafted out, mixed with the sour, metallic tang of blood. Nightblade stepped inside, his eyes narrowing at the sight before him. Dozens of humans, gaunt and pale, were shackled to the walls and lying in filthy straw beds. They were barely alive, their bodies emaciated and drained of vitality, but their hearts still beat faintly, the only source of life left within this cursed place. These are the vampires' food, Nightblade hissed with satisfaction. Poison Claw, do your work. Poison Claw grinned, pulling out small vials of concentrated warpstone poison from his cloak. He approached the nearest human, who weakly lifted his head, his eyes glazed with fear. Please. No more, the human whispered, but Poison Claw ignored him. The assassin poured the poison into the human's mouth, forcing him to swallow. The man gagged, but the damage was already done. One by one, the Skaven worked their way through the chamber, poisoning each human with warpstone-tainted liquid that would fester in their blood. Soon, the vampire will drink from these weaklings, and his strength will crumble rot, Poison Claw chittered, his tail flicking with glee. Nightblade allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The plan was unfolding perfectly. By the time von Carstein fed again, he would unknowingly consume the tainted blood and weaken himself beyond repair. Now, we leave. Return to shadows and wait for the vampire to fall fail, Nightblade commanded. As they slipped back into the darkened corridors of Castle Drakenhof, the poisoned humans moaned weakly behind them, their fate sealed. Nightblade led his assassins deeper into the shadows, their mission a success. Soon, very soon, von Carstein would pay the price for underestimating the cunning of Clan Eshin. In the dark, the assassins smiled, their whiskers twitching in anticipation of the coming downfall. Chapter 4. The Silent Death. Count Vladik von Carstein sat upon his cold, stone throne, his red eyes flickering with the faintest trace of annoyance. He had grown restless, his undead body thirsting for sustenance, for the lifeblood that kept his cursed existence from crumbling into dust. The usual strength that flowed through him felt muted, like a distant memory. His once potent magic, drawn from the dark winds of Shyish, now flickered unevenly, as though something was dulling his power. "Bring me the thralls," he hissed, his voice echoing through the deathly silence of Castle Drakenhof. His servants, mindless ghouls and decaying attendants, moved with sluggish obedience to fulfill their master's command. Deep within the bowels of the castle, the poisoned humans lay writhing in their chains. Their once pale skin now had a sickly green tint, and their veins bulged grotesquely, warped by the deadly warpstone poison coursing through their blood. The taint had spread throughout their bodies, but they were still alive, just alive enough for the vampire to feed. Von Carstein's servants dragged the sickened thralls to his throne room, their lifeless gazes staring at nothing as they were presented before their master. The vampire lord descended from his throne, his fanged mouth curling into a cruel smile as he approached his meal. But something was wrong. The thralls reeked of sickness, their blood stank of rot, and yet his hunger drove him to ignore the signs. He grabbed the nearest thrall by the neck, sinking his fangs deep into the dying human's flesh. As the first drops of blood hit his tongue, a wave of nausea swept through him. Von Carstein's eyes widened in shock. The blood, once sweet and revitalizing, now tasted foul, like bile mixed with something far worse, warpstone. The poison spread quickly through his ancient body, corrupting the magic that sustained him. He staggered back, his hand clutching his chest as the blood he'd just consumed twisted and burned inside him. "What? What treachery is this?" he hissed, his voice laced with venom. His strength, his power, was failing. In the shadows above, Nightblade watched the vampire lord's agony with a gleeful hiss. Hidden among the rafters, he and his assassins had waited patiently for this very moment, their beady eyes glinting as they witnessed the poison take hold. "It works," Nightblade whispered to his lieutenants, his tail twitching with excitement. "The blood drinker is weak now. Soon he will crumble, die." Shadowtail, crouching beside him, nodded eagerly. Yes, he suffers. Just like you said, great Nightblade." The vampire reeled in pain, falling to one knee as he fought to maintain control over his decaying body. His servants watched in confusion, unsure whether to intervene or flee from their master's wrath. But von Carstein's pride was too great. He would not admit weakness, not even now. Nightblade grinned beneath his black cowl. "We wait just a little more," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Let the poison rot him from the inside. Then we strike, yes." The vampire staggered toward the door, growling in frustration, seeking more blood to quell the burning hunger in his veins. "Bring me more." "Thralls," von Carstein commanded weakly, but his voice lacked its usual authority. His undead servants shuffled to obey, but it was too late. The poison had taken its toll. Nightblade's claws itched with anticipation. He could sense von Carstein's defenses crumbling, the mighty vampire lord becoming vulnerable. The assassins exchanged eager glances, their red eyes glinting in the darkness. Von Carstein coughed, blood dribbling from his lips as he stumbled back toward his throne. "What is happening?" he muttered, his voice weakening. He tried to summon his dark magic, to pull strength from the winds of Shyish, but the warpstone-tainted blood blocked his power. Shadowtail leaned closer to Nightblade. "Is it time now, mighty Nightblade? Do we strike kill?" Nightblade's sharp teeth flashed in a wicked grin. Yes, it is time." The assassins dropped silently from the rafters, their claws scraping lightly against the cold stone floor as they approached the weakened vampire. Von Carstein, still in a haze of agony, sensed their movement too late. He turned, his red eyes blazing with fury, but his body was too slow, too weak. "Skaven," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare." Nightblade didn't respond, his movements quick and precise as he darted forward, his warpstone dagger flashing in the dim light. Von Carstein tried to summon a spell, his hands crackling with weak magic, but the poison coursing through him disrupted his power. The dark energy fizzled and died. "Your time is over, blood drinker," Nightblade hissed with glee, his tail flicking as he plunged the warpstone blade deep into the vampire's chest. "Clan Eshin wins, and you die." Von Carstein let out a guttural scream, his body convulsing as the warpstone-laced dagger sent a pulse of poisonous magic through him. His flesh began to wither and rot before Nightblade's eyes, the poison eating away at his unnatural life force. The vampire lord's body crumbled, his bones turning to dust as the warpstone poison completed its deadly work. Nightblade stepped back, watching with satisfaction as the mighty Count Vladik von Carstein, once a terror to all of Sylvania, disintegrated before him, reduced to nothing more than ash. Shadowtail chittered with excitement. He is gone dead. We did it, great Nightblade. Poisonclaw nodded, his whiskers twitching with joy. The blood drinker has fallen. Clan Eshin will be rewarded for this great kill. Nightblade sneered, flicking the dust of the vampire's remains from his cloak. Yes, the blood drinker is no more, but our work is not done. We must leave this cursed place before the others know. With a final glance at the throne where von Carstein had once ruled, Nightblade turned to his assassins. Come. We slip away like shadows. Victory is ours, and the warlord will kneel before Clan Eshin. As the assassins melted back into the darkness, leaving only the crumbling ruins of their target behind, Nightblade allowed himself a moment of triumph. The silent death had been delivered, and Clan Eshin would rise. Chapter 5: The Vampire's Weakness. The throne room of Castle Drakenhof was eerily silent. The flickering flames in the braziers cast long, unnatural shadows across the cold stone walls, while the remains of Count Vladik von Carstein lay as a fine dust on the floor. His final scream of agony still seemed to echo in the chamber, though the vampire lord himself was no more. The poison had done its work. Nightblade stood motionless, his gleaming red eyes watching the shadows shift around him. The assassin's claws flexed with satisfaction. The once unstoppable vampire lord, who had ruled these lands for centuries, had been reduced to nothing by the cunning of Clan Eshin. But Nightblade was not foolish enough to relax just yet. There was still danger in these halls. Good, Nightblade hissed, turning to his lieutenants. The vampire has gone dead, but his thralls are not. Shadowtail, crouching low beside him, twitched nervously. The dead things. They still walk, he muttered, glancing toward the darkened corridors beyond. Without the vampire they will fall. Yes. Poisonclaw, ever the optimist, chittered with excitement. Yes, they will fall crash soon, very soon. They feel the loss of their master, yes. Nightblade's whiskers twitched, his senses sharp as ever. No, not yet, he hissed. The magic that binds them is still strong. It will take time for the power to fade die. We must move fast before they realize their master is no more gone. He flicked his tail sharply, signaling to his assassins to prepare. There was no time for celebrating their victory yet. If they were caught in the heart of Castle Drakenhof by the remaining undead legions, their triumph would be short-lived. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, as though the castle itself was groaning in protest of its master's death. The Skaven could hear the soft, rhythmic footsteps of skeletons marching through the halls, their mindless forms still carrying out their duties. But without von Carstein's dark will to guide them, their coordination was already starting to falter. Time is short, Nightblade growled. We leave now before the dead things wake to our scent. The assassins nodded in agreement, their tails flicking with urgency as they began to retreat into the shadows from which they had come. Moving through the castle's twisting corridors, they kept to the darkest corners, avoiding the patrols of undead that still marched aimlessly through the halls. Each skeleton's hollow eyes glowed faintly with the last vestiges of necromantic energy, but their movements were slow, disorganized, proof that the vampire's death was already taking its toll. As they moved, the assassins encountered small clusters of zombies, shambling through the lower passages. The zombies' decayed flesh barely held together, and the magic that animated them was weakening. Nightblade watched in satisfaction as a few of them crumbled to the ground, their rotting bodies collapsing under their own weight. Shadowtail let out a soft, pleased chitter. See? The dead things fall crash. The magic fades, weakens. Not fast enough, Nightblade hissed, his eyes darting toward the sound of clattering bones in a nearby corridor. We must still be careful. Suddenly the ground shook violently, and a distant roar echoed through the castle. It was a sound that made even the Skaven freeze in their tracks. Nightblade's whiskers twitched in alarm. Something was stirring deep within the castle, something far more dangerous than the mindless undead. "What is that?" Quickfang squeaked, his voice trembling. Nightblade narrowed his eyes. "The vampire's pets," he muttered darkly. He kept horrors in the dark, deep places of this castle. Creatures bound to his will. They still live. The ground shook again, and the sound of claws scraping against stone grew louder. The Skaven exchanged nervous glances, knowing that whatever lurked in the depths of the castle was now unleashed. Nightblade's tail twitched with impatience. Move, now. We cannot stay here. They darted forward, their movements quick and silent as they weaved through the corridors, slipping past the weakening undead. But the sound of the creature in the depths was getting closer, the thudding of its footsteps reverberating through the stone walls. Suddenly, a massive shape loomed out of the darkness ahead. A hulking, nightmarish creature, bound by dark magic and twisted beyond recognition, emerged from the shadows. Its glowing red eyes locked onto the Skaven, and it let out a deafening roar, shaking the walls around them. Nightblade's eyes widened. Run, he barked, darting to the side as the monstrous creature charged forward, its massive claws tearing into the stone floor. The assassins scattered, moving with the speed and agility that only Clan Eshin could muster. The beast's lumbering form crashed through the corridors, smashing through anything in its path as it pursued them. The Skaven dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding its deadly swipes, but the creature's speed was terrifying for something of its size. Quick, down here, Nightblade snarled, leading his assassins into a narrow passageway. The creature was too large to follow, and its enraged roars echoed behind them as it clawed at the walls in frustration. The assassins ran, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of Castle Drakenhof. Nightblade's sharp mind was focused on one thing: escape. The vampire was dead, but the castle was still a death trap. We are close, Shadowtail gasped, his ears twitching as they neared the outer chambers of the castle. Nightblade grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. Yes, soon we will be free. The ground trembled once more, but this time the shaking was weaker. The power of the vampire was fading, and with it, the dark magic that had bound this accursed place. The Skaven could feel it in the air. Von Carstein's hold on Castle Drakenhof was breaking. As they reached the outer courtyard, the assassins stopped to catch their breath. Nightblade turned, his eyes gleaming with triumph. We have done it. The vampire is gone dead, and his castle cracks. Shadowtail, panting, nodded eagerly. We are free, safe now. Clan Eshin will rise. Nightblade's tail flicked with satisfaction. Yes, we will take our reward, and the warlord will no fear our power. But even as they savored their victory, Nightblade knew that there was still much to do. The vampire's reign over Sylvania had ended, but there were always new threats, new enemies to strike down from the shadows. As the Skaven assassins slipped away into the night, leaving the crumbling ruins of Castle Drakenhof behind them, Nightblade allowed himself a final victorious grin. The vampire's weakness had been his downfall, and Clan Eshin, in its treachery and cunning, had won. Chapter 6: Skaven's Last Stand. The air outside Castle Drakenhof was thick with the stench of death and decay, the once grand landscape of Sylvania now reduced to a battlefield of shattered bones and festering corpses. The undead legions still marched, tireless and without fear, their skeletal feet trampling the remains of fallen Skaven who had dared challenge their might. But the war was not over, not yet. In the shadow of the looming castle, warlord Critic stood on a rocky outcrop, overlooking the remnants of his army. His red eyes burned with frustration and desperation, his claws twitching nervously. His fur was matted with dirt and blood, and his once grand armor was dented and scorched from the endless battles against the vampire's forces. "Fools, fools," Critic snarled, his voice a harsh squeak. "The dead things still march. Where is Nightblade? He should have killed the vampire by now." Beside him, his second-in-command, Grit, bowed his head low. We have not heard from him, great warlord. Perhaps the assassin has failed. Critic's tail lashed violently. No. Nightblade does not fail. If he has not returned, then he is still working. Yes. We must hold here, until the dead things fall crash. Around them, the Skaven forces were in disarray. The once massive hordes had been reduced to ragged groups of survivors, huddled together for safety. Warlock engineers fiddled with damaged warp fire throwers and rattling warp lightning cannons, desperately trying to coax them back into action. The once swarming ranks of Skaven were thinning, and every moment that passed brought them closer to complete destruction. Critic knew that his forces could not survive another full assault from the undead. His only hope, his last hope, was that Nightblade and the assassins of Clan Eshin had succeeded in their mission. If the vampire lord was dead, then his legions would crumble soon. But if Nightblade had failed... The sound of bones clattering and the low moans of zombies reached Critic's ears. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw the unmistakable glow of undead eyes approaching through the mist. The next wave of the vampire's forces was on the march. They come again, Grit squeaked, his voice rising in panic. What do we do, mighty warlord?" Critic bared his teeth, fury burning through him. We fight. We hold until the dead things fall. "Hold," Grit chittered nervously. But we are few, warlord. The dead things outnumber us. "Silence, fool," Critic spat, grabbing Grit by the throat. "Do you dare question me?" Grit choked and clawed at Critic's hand, gasping. "And no, mighty warlord. I obey, yes." Critic shoved him aside, snarling. "Then ready the troops. We make our last stand here." The Skaven forces scrambled into position, their movements frantic and chaotic. Rat ogres, bruised and battered from earlier battles, were driven into formation by their handlers, snarling and thrashing as they awaited the next wave of undead. The remaining warlock engineers positioned their warp lightning cannons and warp fire throwers, aiming them toward the advancing horde. Critic turned to the remnants of his warriors, his voice sharp and commanding. This is it. Fight now, or die under the bones of the dead things. We win here, or we are nothing. The Skaven hissed and screeched in response, though their confidence was shaky at best. They could feel the weight of death pressing down on them, the overwhelming force of the undead closing in. Suddenly, the ground shook with the thunderous steps of the enemy. Out of the mist came the first rank of skeletons, their rusted weapons raised high. Behind them shuffled the rotting forms of zombies, their mouths hanging open, moaning mindlessly. And towering above them all were the hulking shapes of the vampire's monstrous creations, giant bat-winged horrors and flesh constructs sewn together from the bodies of countless victims. Critic's fur bristled, his claws twitching with anticipation. Ready, you fools. Now we fight." The Skaven's war machines roared to life. The warp lightning cannons crackled with green energy, firing bolts of searing lightning into the undead ranks. Bones exploded and rotting flesh was scorched, but the undead kept marching, relentless in their advance. The warp fire throwers unleashed gouts of sickly green flame, incinerating zombies by the dozen, yet the horde pressed on. Critic screeched in frustration as he saw the sheer number of undead that remained. More. Fire until nothing stands. Grit, standing beside him, trembled as the undead closed the gap. We cannot hold. There are too many. But just as Critic was about to curse the futility of their efforts, something changed. The undead horde faltered. The skeletons, once moving with mechanical precision, began to stagger. The zombies groaned louder, their rotting bodies slumping to the ground. The monstrous creations let out horrible, disoriented screeches before collapsing into lifeless heaps. Critic's eyes widened in disbelief. What is this? They stop. Grit blinked, staring at the now motionless undead. The vampire. The vampire must be dead. Nightblade's voice echoed from the shadows behind them, causing Critic to whirl around. The master assassin stepped forward, his black cloak billowing behind him. Yes, warlord. Von Carstein is dead, gone, his blood drained, ruined. Critic's jaw dropped, his beady red eyes lighting up with triumph. The vampire is dead. You did it. Nightblade grinned beneath his hood, his sharp teeth flashing. Of course. Clan Eshin always succeeds. The battlefield was eerily silent as the remaining undead forces crumbled to dust. Without their master's necromantic power to sustain them, they fell apart, their existence snuffed out in an instant. The Skaven forces erupted into frantic chittering, their fear turning to joy as they realized that they had survived. The undead legions were gone, and Sylvania was theirs for the taking. Critic turned to Nightblade, his tail twitching with excitement. You have saved us, Nightblade. You will be rewarded well. Clan Eshin will rise high. Nightblade's red eyes gleamed with cunning. Yes, warlord. But now, we must leave this place before others come. Critic nodded eagerly, his mind already spinning with thoughts of the rewards and power that awaited him back in the Under Empire. Yes, we leave at once. As the Skaven forces began to retreat into the shadows, leaving the ruined battlefield behind, Nightblade cast one last glance at the crumbling castle Drakenhof. The vampire was dead, the war won, and Clan Eshin had proven its supremacy once again. But in the dark corners of his mind, Nightblade knew that the treachery of Skaven society was never far behind. Today he had won, but tomorrow the scheming would begin anew. Chapter 7: Infiltration of Castle Drakenhof. The looming spires of Castle Drakenhof pierced the darkened skies like jagged fangs, its ancient stone walls suffused with a cold, malevolent aura. The cursed stronghold of Count Vladik von Carstein had withstood countless sieges, and its undead defenders never rested. Yet tonight the shadows crept with something far more dangerous than mere mortals: Skaven. Nightblade crouched in the underbrush, his black fur blending perfectly with the night. Behind him, his elite team of Clan Eshin assassins waited in silence, their red eyes gleaming in the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of rotten death, but the Skaven's nerves were steel. This was their element: shadows and poison, death unseen. Look, Quickfang whispered, his sharp nose twitching as he peered through the gloom. The dead things guard everywhere. Many eyes. Nightblade's whiskers twitched in irritation, though he kept his voice low, sharp. Of course, fool. The blood drinker hides behind his thralls. We will not be seen caught. He signaled to his assassins with a flick of his tail. Move, quick, fast, silent, like wind. The assassins slithered from the shadows, moving as one, their bodies hugging the contours of the land as they advanced toward the ancient fortress. The shambling undead that patrolled the walls, skeletons with rusted armor, zombies with decaying flesh, were focused on their monotonous duty, oblivious to the deadly vermin slipping beneath their watchful eyes. Nightblade led the way, his senses sharp and attuned to every shift in the atmosphere. The moonlight barely touched the ground as they moved beneath the towering walls. The air was filled with the soft scrape of bones and the groan of rotting flesh. But the assassins were undeterred. This was what they had trained for, what they lived for. Through there, Nightblade whispered, pointing to a small drainage grate nestled in the crumbling stone. The tunnel leads inside. We slip in. Shadowtail, the smallest of the group, scurried forward, his nimble claws making quick work of the grate's rusted bars. With a soft screech, he pried the metal free, opening a narrow path into the castle's underbelly. The stench of stagnant water and rotting debris wafted out, but none of the assassins hesitated. One by one, they crawled inside, disappearing into the darkness. Inside the tunnels, the air was thick and foul, but Nightblade pressed on, his sharp claws scraping lightly against the stone. The sounds of the undead above them grew fainter, replaced by the soft dripping of water echoing through the narrow passage. Nightblade's red eyes gleamed in the darkness as he led the way, every step measured and calculated. Slow, he hissed. The blood drinker's lair is near. We must be careful. Poison Claw, following close behind, sniffed the air, his whiskers twitching with excitement. We poison the blood cattle. Yes. Make the vampire weak. Nightblade bared his fangs in a wicked grin. Yes, the poison works, and then the vampire fails. Clan Eshin will rise, and we will be rewarded. The tunnel eventually opened into a dimly lit chamber, the stone walls lined with ancient, rotting tapestries and old, forgotten relics of von Carstein's long reign. At the far end of the chamber was a winding staircase that led upward into the heart of the castle. Nightblade crouched low, motioning for his assassins to halt. Up there is the blood cattle, the humans he keeps alive to feed. We poison them, make them sick, then slip away. Quickfang, his eyes wide with eagerness, chittered nervously. But the dead things still guard. What if we are caught seen? Nightblade's glare silenced him. We are not caught, fool. We are shadows, unseen, unheard. The dead things are stupid slow. We strike kill quick fast. Without another word, Nightblade ascended the staircase, his movements fluid and silent. The others followed, their hearts racing as they neared their target. The winding stairway eventually opened into a grand hall, dimly lit by flickering torches. And there, in the shadows of the room, they saw them, the blood cattle. Dozens of humans, pale and emaciated, were shackled to the walls, their eyes glazed over with a mixture of fear and resignation. These were the unfortunate souls kept alive only to sustain the vampire's unnatural hunger. Their blood was his lifeblood, the source of his unholy power. Nightblade's claws itched with anticipation. This was the heart of the plan. These are the food, Nightblade whispered, his eyes gleaming. Poison them. Make their blood foul rotten. Poison Claw moved forward, his nimble claws carefully producing vials of warpstone-laced poison. One by one, he approached the humans, forcing the vile concoction down their throats, ensuring that their blood would carry the taint. The humans barely reacted, their weakened bodies too far gone to resist. Nightblade watched, satisfaction curling his lips as the poison took root. Yes. The vampire will drink this poison, and he will weaken fall. His strength crumbles cracks and we kill. Quickfang, watching with wide eyes, chittered softly. And the dead things, will they fall crumble too? Nightblade nodded. Yes, without the blood drinker. The dead things will lose fail. The power that holds them will break. The plan was working perfectly. The humans, already frail and sickly, would soon be nothing more than walking poison for von Carstein. When he fed on them, as he inevitably would, the warpstone would seep into his very essence, weakening him until he was nothing more than a shadow of his former self. And then, when the moment was right, Clan Eshin would strike the final blow. But there was no time to linger. Nightblade knew that even now, Von Carstein's undead minions could sense the disturbance, though they were too dull-witted to act quickly. "Quick, quick, we go now," Nightblade ordered, his tail flicking sharply. We return to the shadows, and we wait for the blood drinker to die. The assassins retreated, slipping back into the darkened corridors of Castle Drakenhof as silently as they had come. The poisoned blood was left behind, festering and waiting for the vampire's inevitable hunger. As they descended back into the tunnels, Nightblade allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The plan was unfolding exactly as he had envisioned. Von Carstein would feed, he would weaken, and then Clan Eshin would claim its prize. Soon, very soon, Nightblade whispered to himself, his voice full of venomous glee. The vampire will fall fail, and Clan Eshin will rise. With one last glance at the cursed castle above, the assassins melted into the shadows, disappearing as though they had never been there at all. Chapter 8: The Death of Von Carstein. The towering walls of Castle Drakenhof were unnaturally still, as though the very air had been poisoned by death itself. The silence weighed heavily, broken only by the distant shuffle of undead feet and the occasional creak of rotting wood. Within the cursed fortress, Count Vladik von Carstein stirred in his grand chamber, his crimson eyes flickering open. He felt it, a deep, gnawing hunger clawing at his insides. It was time to feed. Von Carstein rose from his throne, his gaunt, pale form gliding toward the chamber where his blood cattle were kept. The dark magic that had sustained him for centuries hummed through his veins, but tonight something felt wrong. A dull ache throbbed at the base of his skull, and his once mighty strength seemed to falter, ever so slightly. Still, the hunger demanded to be sated. He pushed the nagging feeling of weakness aside as he entered the feeding chamber. The pathetic humans shackled to the walls moaned softly, their eyes dull and lifeless. Von Carstein's lips curled into a sneer of disdain. "Pitiful creatures," he hissed, his voice like the wind whispering through a graveyard. "Your lives are meaningless, save for what you can offer me." With predatory grace, the vampire lord stepped forward, his fangs gleaming in the dim torchlight. He grasped the nearest human by the throat and sank his teeth into their neck, drinking deeply of the blood that would renew his power. But the moment the first drops of blood touched his tongue, Von Carstein recoiled. His eyes widened in shock, a foul taste coating his mouth like bile. The blood was wrong, tainted, poisoned. "What treachery is this?" he growled, dropping the human's limp body to the ground. Suddenly, the dull ache in his skull intensified into a searing pain. His vision blurred, and his legs buckled beneath him. The dark magic that had once flowed through him like a roaring river now faltered, splintering as though it were being corroded from the inside. Von Carstein's pale skin began to mottle, his once glorious form withering as the warpstone-laced poison took hold. "No," he rasped, clutching at his chest. What is this?" In the shadows above, hidden among the rafters, Nightblade and his assassins watched with gleeful anticipation. The vampire lord was weakening, just as they had planned. He suffers, Quickfang chittered, his tail flicking excitedly. The poison rot works. Nightblade's sharp teeth flashed in a wicked grin. Yes, the blood drinker's strength cracks. Soon he will fall die. Von Carstein staggered back toward his throne, his crimson eyes blazing with fury and desperation. He tried to summon the dark magic that had sustained him for centuries, but the warpstone poison had already corrupted his connection to the winds of Shyish. His spells fizzled and died, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. "Skaven," Von Carstein hissed through clenched teeth. "You dare." Nightblade's red eyes gleamed with malice as he signaled his assassins to move. Yes, blood drinker. We dare. The assassins dropped silently from the rafters, their claws barely making a sound as they landed in a circle around the weakened vampire lord. Von Carstein's eyes flicked between them, his once mighty presence reduced to a shadow of its former glory. "You think to defeat me," Nightblade hissed, stepping forward, his warpstone dagger gleaming in the dim light. You are weak sick now. Clan Eshin rises, and you fall." Von Carstein snarled, baring his fangs, but his movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. He lashed out with what remained of his strength, swiping at the assassins with his long, clawed fingers, but they were too fast, too nimble. Nightblade ducked under the vampire's clumsy attack, moving with the speed and grace of a shadow. His warpstone blade flashed as he struck, plunging the dagger deep into Von Carstein's chest. The vampire let out a howl of rage and agony, his body convulsing as the warpstone poison spread further through his veins. His skin cracked and withered, his once immortal body beginning to decay before Nightblade's eyes. Von Carstein staggered backward, clutching the wound, his eyes blazing with hatred. "I will not fall to vermin," he spat, though his voice was weak, broken. Nightblade sneered, his tail twitching in satisfaction. You already have, blood drinker." He lunged again, striking with deadly precision. The warpstone blade sliced through Von Carstein's neck, severing the vampire lord's head from his body. For a moment there was silence. Then, with a soft, crumbling sound, the mighty Count Vladik von Carstein, the terror of Sylvania, collapsed into a pile of dust. The assassins stood over the remains of the vampire lord, their red eyes gleaming with triumph. Nightblade flicked the dust from his cloak and turned to his followers. "The blood drinker is dead gone. We have won." Shadowtail grinned, his claws flexing eagerly. "Clan Eshin rises high now. We will be rewarded." Quickfang scurried forward, inspecting the remains. The vampire crumbles cracks like dirt. He was nothing. Nightblade turned, casting one last glance at the ashes of Von Carstein. The dead things will fail soon. Without him, the magic that holds them will break crack. He flicked his tail sharply, signaling the others to move. Come, we return to the shadows. Our task is done. The assassins slipped into the darkness, leaving behind the crumbled remains of one of the mightiest vampire lords ever to walk the world. Castle Drakenhof stood eerily still, the air heavy with the weight of Von Carstein's death. But the Skaven did not linger. As they disappeared into the night, Nightblade allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The blood drinker had fallen, just as he had planned. Clan Eshin would rise, their cunning and treachery rewarded with power and influence in the Under Empire. Yes, Nightblade whispered to himself, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Von Carstein is dead, and Clan Eshin rules from the shadows. The death of Von Carstein was but the beginning. Chapter 9: The Collapse of the Undead. Castle Drakenhof's eerie silence was broken by a distant rumble, like a storm brewing in the heart of the cursed land. The death of Count Vladik von Carstein had left a ripple through the necromantic energies that bound his vast armies of the undead. As the warpstone poison consumed the last remnants of his strength, the magic that held his legions together began to unravel. Outside the castle, Warlord Critic and his remaining Skaven forces stood poised, watching the horizon with twitching anticipation. They had braced for yet another wave of undead, one that never came. Instead, a strange stillness settled over the battlefield. Critic's red eyes flicked nervously toward the castle. What is happening? He chittered, pacing back and forth, his claws twitching with impatience. The dead thing should be here. Where's Nightblade? Grit, his second in command, crept closer, his ears flat against his head. Maybe he has failed? The vampire still commands. But before Critic could snap back, something strange began to unfold on the battlefield. The front ranks of the undead, once marching with relentless precision, had come to a halt. The glow of necromantic energy in their hollow eyes flickered and dimmed. They stop, Grit squeaked, his voice rising in confusion. What is happening? Critic's whiskers twitched as he took a cautious step forward. The skeletal warriors, frozen in place, seemed to be unraveling before their eyes. Bones creaked, their joints cracking as the magic that had animated them began to dissipate. Zombies let out low groans before collapsing into heaps of rotting flesh. Towering monsters, flesh golems stitched together from the corpses of the vampire's victims, staggered before falling to the ground with a resounding crash. Critic's eyes widened in disbelief, his tail flicking with excitement. They crumble, fall. The dead things die. The remaining Skaven warriors watched with wide eyes, their fear quickly turning into exhilaration as the legions of undead fell apart before them. The towering monstrosities that had once torn through their ranks were reduced to nothing more than lifeless heaps of decaying meat. Skeletons turned to dust, carried away by the cold winds of Sylvania. Grit's eyes gleamed with greedy delight as he chittered excitedly. The vampire is dead. Nightblade has done it. Critic, still stunned by the rapid collapse of the enemy forces, began to cackle with triumph. Yes, the blood drinker is dead, and his army cracks. We have won. The battlefield was now littered with the remains of von Carstein's once mighty horde, their broken bodies scattered across the landscape. The Skaven, sensing the complete collapse of their foe, erupted into frenzied celebration. Warlock engineers danced madly around their warpstone engines, while rat ogres thrashed their handlers in excitement. Critic's eyes gleamed with a feral satisfaction as he stood atop a small rise, surveying the ruin of von Carstein's army. Now Sylvania is ours. The vampire is no more, and we rule here. But his victory was short-lived. From the shadows, Nightblade and his assassins emerged, their red eyes gleaming with malice. The master assassin's approach was silent, his cloak billowing behind him as he stepped out of the gloom. The vampire is dead gone, Nightblade hissed, his voice like a blade in the dark. Von Carstein has crumbled cracked, just as we planned. Critic turned, his eyes narrowing at the assassin's approach. Nightblade, you have done well. The blood drinker falls, and now Sylvania is ours. Nightblade's sharp teeth glinted as he grinned, but there was no warmth in his expression. Yes, warlord, we have won. But you should know that power here belongs to those in the shadows, not to those who stand in the open. Critic's fur bristled at the subtle threat in Nightblade's words, but he swallowed his growing fear. For now, victory was his, and Clan Eshin's treachery could wait. Yes, of course. Together we rise. Nightblade said nothing more, his eyes cold as he watched Critic celebrate. The master assassin knew that in Skaven society power was fleeting. The warlord's moment of triumph would soon be undercut by the very nature of their kind. Betrayal would come, as it always did. Grit, oblivious to the tension in the air, rushed forward, his tail flicking with excitement. The dead things are no more. We must take everything now. Loot the castle, claim it all. Critic nodded eagerly. Yes. We will take all of von Carstein's treasure. Warpstone, magic things, everything. The Skaven forces surged forward, their greed overpowering their fear as they raced toward Castle Drakenhof. The undead had fallen, their power broken, and now the spoils of war were ripe for the taking. Warpstone glowed faintly in the distance, and ancient artifacts, untouched for centuries, awaited those brave, or foolish, enough to seize them. But Nightblade did not move. He watched as Critic and his forces disappeared into the castle, his claws tapping lightly against the hilt of his warpstone dagger. Let them take what they want, he hissed to his assassins, his voice low and cold. The dead things may be gone, but the shadows will always rule. And we will always be waiting. Shadowtail, standing beside him, grinned wickedly. Yes, Nightblade. Clan Eshin always rises high, even when the others fall crash. Nightblade's eyes gleamed with deadly intent. The vampire was dead, and the Skaven had claimed victory. But in the Under Empire, victory was never certain for long. Power shifted like the wind, and those who did not strike from the shadows would inevitably fall. For now, von Carstein's reign had ended. But in the world of Skaven, the greatest danger was not from the enemies they defeated, but from those who waited in the darkness, ready to take their place. Soon, Nightblade whispered to himself, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. We will take it all. The undead had collapsed, but the game of treachery had only just begun. The night hung heavy over the crumbling ruins of Castle Drakenhof. The eerie glow of warpstone flickered in the distance, casting long, twisted shadows across the broken landscape. The Skaven had seized Sylvania, their chittering echoing through the empty halls of the once mighty vampire fortress. Yet, amid the frenzied looting and celebrations, one group of Skaven remained silent, their eyes ever watchful. In the darkest corners of the castle, Nightblade and his Clan Eshin assassins moved with deadly purpose. Far from the riotous celebrations of Warlord Critic and his forces, Nightblade crouched in the shadows, his red eyes gleaming. The stench of greed and blood filled the air, but it was the scent of treachery that made Nightblade's tail twitch with anticipation. Look at them, Quickfang hissed softly, his whiskers twitching as he watched the Skaven warriors rummage through the castle's treasure hoard. They think they have won. Nightblade's sharp teeth flashed in a grim smile. Yes, let them think that. But we know better, don't we? Shadowtail, crouching beside him, nodded eagerly. The fools fight over scraps, while the true power hides in the dark. The assassins watched as Critic stood before his cheering warlords, reveling in his victory. The warlord raised his arms high, claiming his supposed triumph over the vampire lord. Yet even as he basked in the adulation of his underlings, Nightblade knew the truth. Critic's reign would be short-lived. Skaven society had no place for the complacent, and power belonged only to those who took it from the shadows. Nightblade flicked his tail sharply. Critic believes he is safe now. He thinks the war is over. Should we strike now? Great Nightblade, Poisonclaw whispered, his claws itching for action. End him, and take our place at the top. Nightblade's eyes narrowed. He could feel the weight of destiny hanging in the air. This was the moment where the clever claimed their rewards. But there was no need to rush. Skaven thrived on patience, on the slow unraveling of their enemies. No, Nightblade hissed, his voice a soft rasp. Let him play at victory for now. We will wait until the time is perfect. Then we strike. Shadowtail grinned wickedly, his eyes gleaming. Yes. Let him think he is warlord. When the shadows move, he will be nothing. The Skaven forces had torn through the remnants of Castle Drakenhof, dragging out piles of warpstone, gold, and ancient artifacts. Critic's warlords squabbled over the spoils like rabid rats, each one eyeing the others with growing suspicion. It was only a matter of time before their greed turned to violence. Nightblade could feel it in the air. Critic's time was running short. The warlord's arrogance would be his downfall, just as von Carstein's had been. Clan Eshin, the masters of treachery, would claim their prize from the shadows. Critic does not see, Nightblade whispered, his voice dripping with venom. He thinks his enemies are gone. But the greatest threat comes from within. Poisonclaw's tail flicked eagerly. When do we strike? Nightblade turned to his assassins, his red eyes gleaming with malice. Soon. When the others turn on him, we will be ready. Until then, we wait. The assassins melted back into the darkness, their eyes ever watchful. They moved like shadows through the broken halls of Castle Drakenhof, unseen and unheard, their presence felt only in the cold whisper of the wind. They watched as Critic and his warlords grew drunk on their victory, blind to the danger that lurked just beneath the surface. As the night wore on, the tension among Critic's lieutenants grew. Their greed festered, their ambitions clashing as they fought over the spoils of war. It wouldn't be long before they turned on each other. Days passed, and the Skaven's control over Sylvania deepened. Critic ruled from the ruins of Castle Drakenhof, but his grip on power was slipping. Nightblade's patience paid off as whispers of betrayal spread among Critic's warlords. Skaven were creatures of deceit by nature, and their warlord had begun to lose the loyalty of his underlings. Finally, the moment arrived. In the dead of night, with the moon hidden behind a veil of clouds, Critic's warlords moved against him. A bloody brawl erupted in the heart of the castle, warlord against warlord, as each one sought to claim Critic's throne for themselves. Nightblade watched from the shadows, his tail flicking with satisfaction. Now is the time, he hissed to his assassins. We strike. The assassins moved with deadly precision, slipping through the chaos like wraiths. While Critic fought desperately to maintain control, Nightblade and his lieutenants crept closer, their warpstone blades gleaming in the darkness. Critic, wounded and surrounded by traitors, had barely enough time to realize what was happening before Nightblade struck. With a swift, lethal motion, the master assassin plunged his warpstone dagger into Critic's back, severing the warlord's spine. Critic gasped, his red eyes wide with shock as he crumpled to the ground. You, traitor. Nightblade grinned, his teeth gleaming in the dim light. No, just smarter, cleverer than you. With a final twitch, Critic's body went limp, and the castle fell silent. The remaining warlords, seeing the warlord's death, fell to their knees before Nightblade. They knew better than to challenge the leader of Clan Eshin. Nightblade stood over Critic's lifeless body, his red eyes gleaming with triumph. Now, Clan Eshin rules here. We control all from the shadows. The other warlords bowed their heads, acknowledging Nightblade's victory. In the world of Skaven, power belonged to the clever, the cunning, and the treacherous, and Nightblade had proven himself to be all three. As he looked out over the ruined battlefield, Nightblade allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The vampire was dead, the undead had crumbled, and Clan Eshin now held Sylvania in its claws. Yes, Nightblade whispered to himself, his eyes gleaming with malice. We have won. And the shadows always rise. With that, Nightblade and his assassins melted back into the darkness, their triumph complete. The Skaven would continue their games of deceit and betrayal, but for now Clan Eshin ruled from the shadows, unseen and untouchable. And in the end, the shadows always won.